Hello and welcome to another review for Unit 2. This unit is going to be broken up into two parts. First one will go to expansion, and the next one will finish it up. But we're looking at Unit 2, 1607 to 1754. This bad boy is 10% of the exam, which is pretty significant. So it is pretty important. The last unit, again, was only like 5%, but this one is a big chunk, okay? Now, let us start off with an overview of what's going on here. We're starting off with Jamestown in 1607, and we're ending with the 7 Years' War, okay? So we're moving away from Spanish, we're moving away from the French and the Dutch, and we're really getting into the English side of the colonizing of North America. That's what this unit is all about. We have the Puritan migration with the Pilgrims. We have the House of Borges, the Mayflower Compact, all that stuff. We have a little bit of Native American resistance, right? We have the King Philip's War, which is going to see like the end of Native Americans in Northeast colonies. We see the beginnings of Britain kind of putting its heel on the colonists, right? We have the Navigation Acts, we have the Molasses Acts. So we're going to see the colonists getting tired of Britain kind of controlling it, okay? So that's kind of what we're looking at here with this unit. So, periodization. Where do we start? We start where we left off last unit, 1607, which is the founding date of Jamestown, okay? Now, this is the, I said in the last video, the first British settlement. I lied, it's the first successful British settlement. Roanoke down here in North Carolina has 2 tries. They both fail due to basically rich boys trying to farm, and they can't do it. Jamestown has been running the same issue, but we'll get to that in a second. But again, we're talking about the beginning of British settlement here in Jamestown, and we're going to end in 1754. Now that is the start of the 7 Years' War, also known as the French-Indian Wars. This war is neither 7 years nor is it between the French and the Indians, but we'll talk about that later. It is between the British over here and the French right here, and they're going to fight it out over a little bit of territory in the Americas, but we'll get to that at a later date. So let's start off with politics and political parties. A big movement in this period is Enlightenment ideals, okay? So America is really born out of Enlightenment, right? The British colonies are going to take a lot of these Enlightenment ideals to heart, and it can be seen in a few different instances. First being town hall meetings in New England. Okay, New England colonies, they had meetings where all the white rich men could come and vote and talk about issues in their community, and this was the first time that this is going to happen in North America, so it's a big deal, right? Kind of the beginnings of democracy. We also have the House of Burgess in 1619. That is our first representative assembly, meaning in Virginia they built kind of they put together a House of Representatives to represent the people of Virginia to deal with the British government. Now, are women on this bad boy? Are black people on this bad boy? No, right? This again is rich white men, but we see the development of democracy, and we see the development of Enlightenment ideals. We also get the Mayflower Compact. So when these pilgrims first arrive in North America, they're going to sign this compact that says basically, we're going to govern ourselves, okay? We're still British citizens, but really, we're going to be kind of doing our own thing, and they get everyone on board to sign it, and by everyone, of course, I don't mean women, I mean men. Okay? So they get all the men on board to sign this thing. Now, that is our Enlightenment ideals for politics and political parties. Obviously, we have no political parties, but we do have a few more political points. That being British relations. Okay? So again, we're going to start seeing the beginning of a kind of independence movement forming in America here. And that's going to start with the salutary neglect. This meaning that the British are essentially going to neglect their colonies over in the Americas. Now, why would they ignore them? Mostly because they're fighting wars with Spain. They're fighting wars with the French. They're too busy to deal with these kind of backwater colonies growing tobacco and rice. Right? They don't want to deal with it. Now they are going to try to profit. Okay. They're going to pass these things called the Navigation Acts, and this says that the Americans can only trade with the British. And this is going to anger a lot of Americans because they want to sell their rice and they want to sell their tobacco to other countries who can pay a better price and who won't tax them. Now, these guys are Americans. Are they going to listen to this law? No way, okay? They're going to be smuggling stuff all over the place. Keep in mind, the Caribbean is just south of here, and there's Spanish, Portuguese, French colonies down there in South America. They're going to be smuggling stuff out of North America constantly. So these navigation acts are not all that effective, except for making Americans angry. I'm sorry, the colonists angry. There's no Americans yet. Now they're also going to pass the Molasses Act. This is a little picture of delicious molasses, but it is a tax on molasses, and this is going to anger Americans. No, I'm sorry, again, colonists. Not because the colonists are eating spoonfuls of delicious molasses, but because they use it to make rum, which is very, very profitable at the time for the colonists. So they're upset that the British want to get a piece of that action, okay? Again, they're not really going to listen to this thing, okay? They don't really pay their taxes. Famously, all the taxes passed by the British almost make no money in the colonies because these colonists are so far away, they just completely ignore these taxes. Now, we also have Bacon's Rebellion as far as politics goes, okay? Now, this is 1676, so Jamestown has been around for almost 70 years at this point. It's kind of an established rural town. But what happens is Nathaniel Bacon, who's an indentured servant, is going to form a rebellion against the elite leaders of Jamestown and Virginia. Okay? And these indentured servants are dudes brought over from Britain, and they're forced to work basically as slaves. Okay? Now, British citizens are not going to put up with that. So they join Mr. Bacon, and they go to Jamestown. They burn the whole place to the ground. And this scares the pants out of the elite in Virginia. Okay? And they start thinking, hey, where are we going to get our labor? If these indentured British servants aren't going to work for us, where is another area of labor we can get? And this is going to lead to the rise of African slavery. Now, we're going to move away from politics and go to foreign policy and wars. Now, we have a couple wars here. The Pequot War is going to be a rebellion against the British by the Native Americans. Okay, they're going to organize together. They're going to say, hey, let's kick these white people out of our country. Okay, this is our land, and these white invaders are taking over. So they all get together. They use the arms that they have gotten and traded by furs, and they're going to attack the British. Now this fails. Okay. And the New England colonists are pissed. They're going to kill a ton of Native Americans because of this rebellion, but it will be squashed. And only, 50 years later, we have King Philip's War. So once again, King Philip is going to unite a bunch of tribes in New England, and he is going to try to fight these English colonists and get rid of them. And once again, it's going to fail. And the New England colonists are going to kill massive amounts of these Native Americans, which is really going to be like the end of resistance in that region for Native Americans. Okay, this really marks the end of northeastern anyway resistance. It's important to note too, middle colonies, southern colonies, they have their own wars, but if you know these two wars, you should be fine on the test. Now, we also have 7 Years' War, also known as the French Indian War, but we'll talk about that next unit because it really falls into that time period. Now, economy. How are the economies different between all the regions? Well, across the board, they're going to be trading with Native Americans, okay? Mostly in the form of furs, sometimes in the form of crops. And the British in these colonies offer the Native Americans finished goods, okay? Mostly guns. And those guns are going to be used between Native American tribes, but again, we'll get to that in a second here, okay? Now, New England region, up here, top colonies here. In order of importance, we have fishing, shipping, and farming. Okay, so the New England colony, famous for the cod up here, they're going to catch and salt a ton of fish that will be exported over to Europe to feed the growing populations in Europe, okay? They are also going to build ships. They're going to make loan companies, shipping companies, all that kind of stuff. And that is going to lead to the growth of urban cities on the coast as well. Now, as you head down to the middle colonies over here, that includes New York and Pennsylvania, these guys are, in order of importance, farmers and shippers, okay? They farm a lot of wheat, and that wheat is going to feed all of the colonists. So they're called the breadbasket of the 13 colonies because of this wheat farming. You can see they also do a little bit of shipping and fishing, but mostly they are food producers. Now the middle region does not use slaves, and that's kind of important, okay? It's mostly small farms owned and operated with some indentured servants, but slavery is kind of rare up here in these middle colonies. AP has decided to add an additional region called the Chesapeake region. Now this includes Delaware over here. It includes Maryland and Virginia, usually. Okay, so those are your Chesapeake regions. Now, these used to all be lumped into the southern colonies, but they've decided to break it up because the Chesapeake region has the plantation economy, just like the South does, but they grow tobacco, okay? Chesapeake, if you remember the Jamestown colony, John Ralph discovers tobacco, so they are tobacco forward. Whereas in the South, they are rice and indigo, okay? So they're a little different in that sense. So Chesapeake is tobacco. Mostly they are going to use slaves, but not to the extent that those southern colonies do, okay? South Carolina especially has a majority slave population, more slaves than there are slave owners, more slaves than there are whites even. So the South has a ton of slaves. And again, they're growing rice and indigo, which is like a dye. So, expansion, what are we looking at here? Okay, Roanoke, first off, is the first British foothold. It fails twice. We get Jamestown, which is the first successful one. And this colony over here is a charter colony, meaning that basically a corporation paid paid for Jamestown to exist, and they expected profit, okay? Now, what did they think they were going to get? They thought they were going to get gold. There is no gold in Virginia, so they do get tobacco. And that's really where all their profits are going to come from. Before they are profitable, they go through a starving time, which is a particular winter where they're growing no crops. Again, this is a shit full of rich boys who don't know how to farm, okay? And so they don't know how to farm. They don't have any food. They start starving. They eat the dogs first. They eat the cats. They eat the horses. And eventually they're going to dig up their dead loved ones and start consuming those bodies, okay? So Jamestown goes through hardship but does bounce back. Now, by 1732, we have all 13 British colonies formed. And that is important that we have expanded. Now, the British have expanded to all 13 of these areas. We also have this little Ohio River Valley out here, past the Appalachian Mountains, which run along the British colonies here. But this area is claimed by both the French and the British. Now, this may lead to a little bit of conflict later in history. We'll have to see, okay? But this area is claimed by both the French and the British. The British are so worried about colonists getting into this disputed area and causing problems with the French that they're going to pass the Proclamation of 1763, something you should definitely know, okay? And this says, no colonists may pass the Appalachians and settle in this area. Now, we know our Americans. Are they going to listen to this? No. Okay, they're going to pass over these Appalachians and settle anyway, and I'm sure everything will turn out just fine with that territory coming up. Now, here's an image of a jawbone and a skull bone from the Jamestown excavation site. You can see these marks on here. These marks are indicative of butchering. In other words, the Jamestown colonists were eating the flesh off of the faces of their loved ones, which is pretty gnarly. Now, this is end of part 1. Part 2 will cover all the way up until the end of your handout, so wait for that to come soon. Thank you guys. Hope you are healthy and safe. Eat your vegetables. Listen to your parents.